Savielly Tartakower was always known for his originality, and his game against Efim Bogolyubov was no exception. Having played the ultra-sharp King's Gambit, after the opening moves he literally stunned his opponent and all the experts with the incredibly modest, quiet move Bishop e2. Bogolyubov turned out to be completely unprepared for such an unconventional approach and was never able to find the right key to the position. This brilliant victory allowed Tartakower to share the lead with Alekhine right after the first round. Let's see how this amazing home preparation worked out. e4, e5, f4, e takes f4. Bishop e2. This unusual move is based on two ideas. 1. If black defends the gambit pawn by means of g7, g5, the white bishop can be transferred to f3, which allows developing the knight to e2 and thus preventing the g5, g4 attack. 2. The advance d7, d5, unless black plays it immediately, does not force white's reply as much as in the regular bishop's gambit, because in this case the bishop will not be attacked by the pawn. d5 the simplest and perhaps the best reply. True, black failed to fully demonstrate their advantage in this game, but the improvement of this system played by Capablanca in the 19th round makes it, in any case, highly worthy of attention. In particular, black cannot play knight f6 in response to bishop e2 due to e5 and so on, which, with the bishop on c4, is parried by the move d5. However, despite all this, the move bishop e2 cannot be recommended, as it does not contain even a shadow of a threat and allows black to choose between several excellent development plans, while they already have an extra pawn. Also good is knight e7. Although not quite enough to reveal a concrete advantage for black, see the game Tartakower, Alekhine, 9th round. But black could react most energetically to this bishop move, which blocks its own queen, by playing f5 for example. E takes f5. Queen h4 check. King f1. d5 and if bishop h5 check, then king d8, after which black is clearly better, since it is much easier for them than for the opponent to win that f pawn. Moreover, the open f file would serve as an excellent base for a direct attack on the king. Unfortunately, we will probably have to wait a long time for someone to employ this interesting defense, because the position achieved by white, even with the defenses tried in New York, is unlikely to tempt anyone in a serious struggle to repeat the variation used by Tartakower. The erroneous e5 does not deserve attention at all because of d6. E takes d5. Knight f6. c4. c6. d4. C takes d5. After this move, white has no difficulties with development and even obtains a certain positional advantage thanks to several open lines. Correct is bishop b4 check, as Capablanca played, and which even a century later Stockfish recommends. Bishop d2. Bishop takes d2 check. Queen takes d2. C takes d5. Black is better. Bishop takes f4. D takes c4. Otherwise, white could later obtain a pawn majority on the queenside by playing c4, c5 if the occasion arises. Bishop takes c4. Bishop b4 check. Knight c3. Castles kingside. Knight e2. Bishop g4. Castles kingside. Knight bd7. Queen b3. Bishop takes c3. Black does everything that can be done in this admittedly disadvantageous position for them. Although they leave the opponent with two bishops, they create strong outposts for their knights, which will allow them to develop pressure on the central pawns. Overall, despite the fact that the position looks rather in white's favor, the game is actually roughly equal. B takes c3. Knight b6. Bishop d3. Knight fd5. More correct is Rook c8 with pressure along the c file. Bishop d2 preserving the advantage of the two bishops, while simultaneously defending the c3 square. Bishop takes e2 quite consistent. With the support of the knight, it would be easier for white to advance the c pawn. Bishop takes e2. Rook c8. Rook f3. And after c4. Knight f6. d5. Knight e4. Bishop b4. Rook e8. Black could have defended successfully. Queen c7. Now that c pawn is pinned in place for a long time. Rook af1. f6. It is difficult to avoid this weakening of the a2, g8 diagonal, since otherwise it is impossible to prepare the important move. Knight c4, which did not work immediately due to Bishop takes c4. Queen takes c4. Queen takes b7 and so on. Although modern engines quite approve of the move knight c4. Bishop d3. Knight c4. Rook h3 provokes a further weakening of the king's position. However, this concession is quite tolerable here. In this position white should play Bishop c1. White is better. g6. Rook e1. Of course, white has no reason to avoid the opponent's upcoming drawing combination, because after Bishop c1. Queen c6. a4. a6. Queen c2. f5, and if the occasion arises Rook f8, f7 and b7, b5, black would consolidate on the light squares and would stand at least no worse. Knight takes d2. It would be a mistake here to play Rook f7. Bishop takes c4. Queen takes c4. Rook e8 check. Rook f8. Queen takes b7. White is better. Queen takes d5 check. Queen f7. Better than Rook f7, after which white could continue the attack via Rook e3. Queen takes f7 check. Rook takes f7. Rook e2. Knight c4. Rook e8 check, the so-called deflection tactic. After this exchange, white obtains a microscopic positional advantage in the rook endgame, as black has to waste a tempo to defend the h pawn. Rook takes e8. Bishop takes c4. h5. King f2. Rook c8. Bishop takes f7 check. King takes f7. Rook e3. b5. The simplest path to a draw. The counterattack. Rook c4 would already be doubtful due to the immediate advance of white's passed pawn. d5. Rook a4. Rook e2. Rook c4. d6. Rook takes c3. Rook e7 check. King f8. Rook takes b7. Rook d3. Rook takes a7. Rook takes d6. a4. Rook d2 check. King f3. Rook a2. a5. Rook a3 check. King e4. Rook a2. a6 and black cannot take the opponent's pawns. There was no sense for black to calculate the outcome of the pawn endgame after. Rook e8. Rook takes e8. King takes e8. a4 and so on, because they could soon steer the game into a pawn endgame under much more favorable circumstances. King e2. Rook c6. King d3. h4. Did black really want to play for a win here? A draw was secured for them after. Rook e6 for example. Rook takes e6. If the rook leaves the e file, then rook e1 follows, of course, with strong counterplay. King takes e6. King e4. King d6 followed by king d6, c6, d6, and it is obvious that white has nowhere to break through. The move in the game, which starts a rapid pawn advance on the king side, leads to very interesting complications, but they are still rather dubious for black. Rook e2. g5. In case of Rook e6, white planned to reply. Rook b2. Rook b2. The pawn sacrifice. a4 with the aim of obtaining two connected passed pawns in the center would be a mistake. b takes a4. c4. a3. d5. Rook a6. Rook a2. f5. c5. Rook a4. King c3. f4. King b3. Rook a6. King b4. h3. g takes h3. f3. King b5. Rook f6 with a win. Rook b6. d5. The passed pawn, supported by the king, which now has an open path to break through, makes a formidable impression. However, black still finds a salvation. King e7. King d4. g4. King c5. A fruitless move, which, however, spoils nothing, since white can return to the previous position. Rook b8. King d4. The pawn endgame after. Rook takes b5. Rook takes b5 check. King takes b5 led to a draw, for example. f5. King c4. f4. King d3. f3. King e3. F takes g2. King f2. h3 and so on. If g3 then h takes g3. f3. King e3. Rook b6. h3. After this move, black's counter chances on the king side become much weightier. Winning the h4 pawn, which white counted on, does not succeed. Much greater prospects opened up for white after. Rook e2 check. King d7. Rook f2 with the threat to attack the kingside pawns with the move rook f4. This continuation would apparently have exposed the flaw in black's defense, initiated by the move h4. g3. a3. King d7. King c5. This attempt also should not have led to success. To the immediate. Rook b4. Black could answer. Rook a6. Rook b8. Rook b4. The capture. Rook takes b5 would even lead to a loss. Rook takes b5 check. King takes b5. f5. King c4. f4. King d3. f3. f5. An ingenious defense, which clearly shows that white's plan is insufficient for a win. a4. With this move, white wins a pawn but allows the enemy rook to invade their camp. However, they had nothing better anymore. It would be a mistake to play. Rook takes b5. Rook takes b5 check. King takes b5. f4. Black is winning. a6. King d4 threatening c4. But it was better to play d6 and white has nothing to worry about. Rook e8. In his time, Kotov gave this move an exclamation mark. Although now it is already considered a mistake. It was better to play a5 retaining a winning position. Rook b1. b4. King d3. After a takes b5. Rook e4 check. King d3. Rook takes b4. C takes b4. A takes b5. It again resulted in a hopeless endgame for white. B takes a4. Of course, not. Rook e4. Rook takes e4. F takes e4 check. King takes e4. B takes a4. King d3. The white king would be in the square of the a pawn. Rook takes a4. Rook e1. Much weaker is King d6. c4. Rook takes a6. Rook g1, an unfortunate mistake, depriving black of the fruits of their excellent defense, as Alexander Kotov considered in those years. According to modern analysis, it is quite possible to play this way. After the natural move, Rook d1 check, the game would have ended in a draw, for example. King c4. Or King e3. Rook takes d5. Rook h6. Rook e5 check. King f3. Rook e4. Rook f6. Rook c4. Now white connects their passed pawns and wins easily. Rook d2. King c5. Rook takes g2. Rook a7 check. King e8. King d6. Rook e2. Rook a2. King d6. c4. King e5. Rook e2 check. King d6. Rook c2. King c5. Rook d2. Rook f1. 2. Rook c1. Decisive is King e3. King d6. Rook d4. Rook c2. Rook takes h4. Rook takes g2. King f3. Rook g1. Rook d4, and so on. King e2. Rook g1. King e3. It would be fatal to play d6 since Rook takes g2 check. King e3. Rook takes d2. King takes d2. King takes d6. One can shake the opponent's hand. King d6. c5 check. King takes c5. d6. The pawn is clearly unstoppable now. Rook e1 check. King f4. Rook e8. d7. Rook d8. King takes f5. Black resigned.